No, September. September. We're here to talk about September. Yeah. Second argument. Take a drink. Nope, I almost said something that's gonna give it away. Because again, there is a riff, a romantic, whatever your Lisa Jewell era is that you're in. What am I trying to say? Hi everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse and welcome to part 2 of what I read in September. So if you guys watched part 1, I did some teasers about like a fave book and some books I was reading that I was hoping to finish. But if you watched the vlog I put up, then you will know kind of how September ended. So maybe there won't be any teasers or any surprises here, but I'm very excited to talk about some books that I read. I absolutely had a really good reading month, and I'm happy to say, teaser, I'm into October and I'm having a really good reading month and I'm trying to grab a book without breaking eye contact with the camera. So I am going to do best book first. I'm not saving best for last. And you know, I don't usually like rank them or anything like that, but if I had to choose a favorite of the month, I have the best subscribers, the best crew, the best group here because you guys put this one on my radar. And it's Kill for Me, Kill for You by Steve Kavanaugh. So I have screamed about his book 13 so many times on here and how much I loved him as an author and how incredible that book was. And I'm going to read more, I'm going to read more, I'm going to read more. And I promptly bought a bunch of his books and read none of them. So when I was talking, I guess it was like in my Q&A, or maybe it was like a question, I don't even know. I think it was like in the Q&A this came up about me reading more Steve Kavanaugh, and I didn't even know this book was out. So this is a Strangers on the Train premise. This is out in the UK now. It'll be out in the US, I want to say March. I've talked about this book several times between hauling it, posting it on Instagram, and talking about it in my vlog, and I'm still not sure if it's March, but it'll be down below. But you can get it from Blackwell's if you're as obsessive as I am, because that's what I did. So this book, it's a standalone. It's not part of his Eddie Flynn series, but as someone who started Eddie Flynn in the middle, if you want to go into the Eddie Flynn series, that's totally fine too. But this is a complete standalone, and it's a Strangers on the Train premise, which I feel like tells you everything you actually need to know about this book, where it's a kill for me, kill for you. You do mine, I'll do yours. So this is a premise that I love. It's kind of like the And Then There Were None. I love seeing how different authors run with that. And in this one, you guys know one of my favorite all-time books is The Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson. So while I was reading this, I couldn't get The Kind Worth Killing out of my head. And I'm not going to talk, obviously, plot points or anything in either one of the books, but there was a point in this book where I was like, I know what's going to happen. This is what happened in The Kind Worth Killing. I know exactly where this book is going. I did not know exactly where this book was going. So this takes place kind of around like September through Thanksgiving. So very good time of year to read it if you're someone who likes to read in the 'tis the season our book is set in. And we get multiple POVs. And basically what we have, I feel like I'm just going to read like, again, the beauty of I'm going to cover my thing here, of the UK book is it gives you just enough. So it says, one dark evening in New York City, two strangers meet by chance. Over drinks, Amanda and Wendy realize they have so much in common. They both feel alone, they both drink alone, and they both desperately want revenge against two men who destroyed their families. Together they have the perfect plan. If you kill for me, I'll kill for you. So I honestly think that is all you need to know. This is set in and around New York City, which I absolutely love. And this book was such a compulsive read and such a wild ride. And I was twisted, I was turned. It is dark and messed up in all the best possible ways. There's great characters in this. There's a great blend of action and emotion. There's just so many brilliant choices made by Steve Kavanaugh. I'm like very carefully talking in my head before I talk out loud, and I just absolutely loved it. So there is a little bit of a tab game going on in here, and I think it's absolutely fantastic. So I am my own, I don't want to say like worst enemy, but like I am my own What am I trying to say? I took a big Steve Kavanaugh game. I have not read more of his books. I was reading this book, and while I was reading this, exactly like when I was reading 13, I was like, this man is amazing. I need to read everything. So I fully intend to work him into Booktrovert Bingo, plug, and to read some more of his books. But if you're looking for a slump buster, this one's fantastic. If you're just looking for a great compulsive page-turning read, like this is a read it in a weekend, read it in a day kind of a book if you just want to like hunker down and give it a go. And it's just so good. It's just so good. I mean, I could say 10,000 different things in here, and there were so many characters that I loved, and like my note on top of other stuff that's more spoilery just says, wow. Which is totally how I felt while I was reading it, and when I finished it, just, yes, wow. Fantastic, fantastic, fantastic. It's just a really, really fantastic book. And he's amazing. He's amazing. I need to read more of him. Don't sleep on this book. If you have an arc of it in your NetGalley, give it a go. If you want to get your hands on it early, if you are in the UK and you can get your hands on it, technically it's not early for you guys, then I would just highly recommend it. So I don't do stamps of approval, but if I did, totally, totally fantastic. Okay, now I feel like anything else I'm going to talk about is going to sound less exciting, but I don't mean for that to be the case because these are some great books. So just bear with me. But the next one I read is Halloween Party by, I was going to say by Hercule Poirot, by Agatha Christie. It's a Poirot. So I talked about this in that weekend vlog. This is the book that inspired that new movie, A Haunting in Venice. I have not seen it yet. I fully plan to see it, but my understanding is that this is like little to do with the movie. Like I think the movie is I think there's a lot of liberties taken in a very loosely based way with this, but I'm totally fine with that. That trailer for A Haunting in Venice completely has me hooked. That could be based on nothing Agatha Christie wrote and I would still be intrigued by it. But this is obviously one of her books that I haven't read yet, so I wanted to read it and I was inspired to read it when I heard about the movie. And if you guys saw the vlog, you would already know this, so apologies for repeat content. This also is the book that when I was Googling it, when I was like, I want to read that book, this edition came up on good old Google, which led me to that Beautiful Books website, which led me to buying the book amongst a whole bunch of other ones. So this is the UK special edition. It does have the metallic foiled cover on it. There's also a US special edition, which is red and also quite beautiful. It has deckled edges. I'm not gonna lie, I saw it in the bookstore and I was like, ooh, but then I was like, I've got this, we're good. So in this one, we have a young girl. The premise of this book is found dead with her head in the bobbing for apple bucket at a Halloween party. So not a good ending for her. But sweet, sweet Joyce does meet a bit of an end at the beginning of the book. And at this party is a woman, Mrs. Oliver, who appeared in Dead Man's Folly. I know she's appeared in some other Poirot books, but she is a mystery writer. She is actually, because I did a little bit of research, because I recognized her from Dead Man's Folly, and she's a bit of an Agatha Christie self-insert, which I didn't know, which I think is fun. So in this book, she reaches out to her good friend Poirot and is like, this just happened in this town. We need you. So he winds up coming to town to investigate what happened to this girl. And it's just classic Christie. So I've said this again, I apologize if you saw the vlog and I sound like a broken record, but I am not someone, it's funny, I was just talking to Amber from Books and Beaches about this, where I was like, sometimes when I go into a book, I'm definitely trying to puzzle out what happened, and other times I'm not, and I love the red herrings, and I love being wrong, and I love falling for things. And when I read a Christie book, I don't even attempt to try and figure out like the who, what, when, where, why. We know the how. Poor Joyce. But I just love to read them for the characters, for the storytelling, for just her brilliant writing. And there's such familiarity in her books because obviously she has a lot of like a specific style to her writing. And I just really, really enjoy it. And I love the repeat characters. Dead Man's Folly is one of my favorites. I love Mrs. Oliver. And I just think it was such a fun time. So Eventually you get to the point that you start to piece things together as he is, but I definitely am not someone who can solve an Agatha Christie book. But it was a fun time. I wound up listening to the audiobook, which Hugh Fraiser narrated, which was really, really well done. So I was reading When I'm Dead by Hannah Morrissey. Spoiler alert, I didn't finish that till October. So if you follow me on Instagram, you know how I feel about it. If you don't, you can just tune back in here in a couple of weeks and I'll tell you all about it. But I was reading that and I wanted an audiobook to sort of balance it out. And this to me was not competing with the mystery of that book. So anyway, all that to say, I really, really enjoyed this book and I had a fun time with it. And I'm trying to, not in a choreographed way, because you guys know I don't plan out my reading, but I would like to, just like over the years, gradually read some more Agatha Christie. So I do have a handful of her books. I'm not trying to like collect them all and read them all, but I've read a handful. I definitely enjoy them. I would love to read more of them. It definitely feels like a fun little project to have. I have a lot of read to zeros. I don't know if I'm going to read her to zero, but anyway, if you're curious to read what inspired A Haunting in Venice, or you're just looking for a really fun book, and it's a Halloween party, so 'tis the season, another seasonal read for you guys, highly recommend it. Typical, which I don't mean in a negative way, typical Christie, and just a very well done story with very interesting characters. And I will say one thing though. So I was listening to it and I was like, wow, she is really like ahead of her time with a lot of what she's talking about in this, and like the commentary and some of the ways she's describing people. I don't know why in my head, I'm just like, every Christie book is from like the 40s and 50s. So I actually, did the thing. This was first published in 1969, and I was like, oh, that makes much more sense. Like, it's so much more modern than some of her earlier books, because again, but I didn't realize that until partway into it. But I was like, wow, this feels much more contemporary than anything else. Like, look at her go. Look at her being way ahead of her time, when in fact she was just with the times, which was great. So anyway, loved it. Highly recommend it. There you go. Okay, next up was a series September read that I did, and this is After the Party by Lisa Jewell. So this is the sequel, duology, Ralph's Party, and After the Party. And these came out, well, they're set like 11, 12 years apart. And then in real life time, I feel like she actually wrote them within that same time frame. Yeah, this came out in 2010, and her first one I want to say was 99. So that makes sense. And if you guys, again, have been here for a minute, I don't mean to keep saying that, but you will know that I have raved about Ralph's Party, which was her first book. It was the first Lisa Jewell book that I ever read. It made me fall in love with her. And I didn't realize that she had written kind of a sequel to that book. So I was excited to read it when I found out about it, and I bought it, and then I didn't read it, and now I read it. So all's good. So for all the Lisa Jewell fans out there, or anyone who's maybe not familiar with Lisa Jewell, she started her career writing more contemporary rom-com relationship books. She calls them pop fiction. It's like people in their 20s, people in their 30s, figuring out life, jobs, relationships, friendships, complexities, all of those things, marriage, kids, just sort of like that sort of adulting in certain ways. And what I love about her books, and she reminds me very much of Marian Keyes, is it's a mix of like great story and great characters, but you do get really good humor and wit. And then you also get a lot of weightier subject matter, but not, this is like her pre-thriller murdery days. So she sort of wrote, I want to say it was like 6 or 7 books that kind of fall into this pop fiction category. Then she started to move a little bit into like a little bit of mystery, a little air of mystery, like I Found You and The Third Wife. And then she really made a turn more into these kind of very character-driven thrillers. And I've loved watching her career change. I love that no matter which sort of era, whatever your Lisa Jewell era is that you're in, you can still very much feel like you're in a Lisa Jewell book, because at the end of the day, for me, it's all about the writing, it's all about the characters, and it's all about the story. So even though you don't necessarily get the thrillers in the early books, I really, really love her books so much. So always hard to talk about a sequel. So Ralph's Party focuses on Ralph and Smith are best friends, they're flatmates, and they're looking for a third flatmate, and this woman, Jem, winds up moving in. So it very much is sort of like the dynamic of the three of them, the love triangle, unrequited love, dating, and then it's a flat in a 3-story house. So we're following the couple that lives upstairs and then the single woman on the top floor and how their lives intersect. And it's just such a great book. I just love it so much. I have such nostalgic love for that book. And then this book picks up, like I said, it's like 12 years later in chapter 1, and then we go back a year. So we wind up getting a lot of year 11 and then into year 12. And we pick up where Smith, Ralph, and Jem are. And again, you get a lot of family dynamics in this. You get a lot of strong friendship dynamics in this. And it's really like the life after the happily ever after. And I know a lot of people don't want that next book. And when it was, I've heard this about the boyfriend candidate and then or is it the boyfriend candidate? No, that's Ashley Winstead. What's the Alexis Hall book? Dang it, I'm gonna have to look it up. The Alexis Hall book. I'm gonna say it 5 times. The Alexis Hall book. Boyfriend Material. Boyfriend Material and then Husband Material by Alexis Hall. So a lot of people didn't love Husband Material because it was like the what happens next. I, for one, absolutely loved that book because to me, I feel like I read so many books that were the happily ever after, which completely deluded me when I was younger into thinking that's where the story ends. But that's where the story begins. And I really love seeing that, like, finding your person doesn't instantly make everything better. And in so many ways, it makes life much more complicated. And there's highs and lows, and there's good days and bad days. And what I really love that she's exploring in this is reassessing where you are in life, which is one of my favorite things in a book. Someone who feels lost, someone who feels like, how did I get here? Someone who feels like, this is what happened. Like, this is where I am right now. I'm not supposed to be here at this age. Like, this is not what I envisioned for myself. And really starting to question things. And you grow up and you grow apart and things happen and life changes you and life experiences change you. And there's a lot of anger to some characters in this book, which felt really authentic to me. And I very much connected with a lot of emotions of some of the characters in this book, whether it was trying to recapture things from the past or being angry about things in the present and kind of wanting to run away and wanting to stay and just sort of all of these very complicated dynamics. And I love that people are imperfect and they are complicated and people are going to make mistakes and some things are forgivable and some things are unforgivable, and just really figuring out what is right for you, and it maybe wasn't what you thought was right 10 years ago or something like that. So again, I'm trying to kind of talk in circles a little bit, but there's some really fantastic characters in this. There just was a lot of relatability, and I appreciated I want to say they were around 30 in the first book, so they're in their 40s here. And I think, there's life shifts that happen when you get to be of a certain age. And I think a lot of the struggles that Jem is having are very relatable. And I, for one, enjoyed the anger of this book. I'm a little bummed because Lisa Jewell has said on multiple podcasts and occasions that this is her least favorite book that she's ever written. And I actually posted about it on Instagram. And she's such a dream author because she's so connected to her audience, and she sent me a message about it and told me, she was like, this is my least favorite book I ever wrote, so if you liked this one, like, you're bound to like the rest of them. And I was like, oh my god, I've read so many of your books, but I'm working on your backlist, and I loved it. And I had also heard a podcast interview where she said her editor made her like tame down the rage in this book. So I'm very curious like how ragey it was, but a lot of it was reflective of where she was at in her life at the time, which I also love the writer's journey and how the book that they were writing and how it's reflective of where they were in their life or things that had happened up until that point and how it comes out in the writing. But anyway, I'm a massive fan of hers. I think if you are a massive fan of hers, it's an absolute must read. If you're looking to get into her, don't start here because it's the second book in a series, so it will make absolutely no sense to you. But maybe start with Ralph's Party if you just want to go for her more contemporaries rather than her thrillers. But I've said this more times than I can even count. She is a read to zero author for me. I have started to build my Lisa Jewell collection. So I have a bunch of her books. I did not have some of her backlist books. And I swear, gonna do a Lisa Jewell video for you guys. So it's just a matter of when. And yeah, I had fun with it. So Serious September for the win. The next book I read as an arc, and it is The Christmas Orphans Club, pointing over here, by Becca Freeman. So she is one of the co-hosts of the Bad on Paper podcast, which I have talked about a ton on here. I'm a huge fan of. Her and Olivia Mentor are both writers. They talk about books, they talk about personal life, they talk about a whole bunch of stuff, but I have listened to Becca's writing journey on it, so I was super excited to get my hands on this book. And this is a rom-com, but the romance is between two best friends, and it's a platonic romance. And then there's like a B storyline of like an actual romance. So it's really a love of a friend group. So it's these four friends who have come together over time. So our main characters are Hannah and Finn. They met in college. They were both there over Christmas break because neither of them had any place to go. So Hannah's parents have passed away. Finn's parents have disowned him. And Hannah and Finn wind up having sort of this spontaneous, ridiculous Christmas together when they are at college at BC. And then they carry it on for the next few years there, and then they move to New York City, and kind of along the way, they've picked up two other orphans to join them for their Christmas Orphans Club. So when we are meeting them in present day, Finn is getting ready to move to LA, which is going to break up the group, and it is sort of cause for some drama between the group. But we get to see past Christmases. We get to see how the different orphans were welcomed into the group, and we get to see the dynamic between all of them. So this is fun. It is light. It is very New York City heavy. So if you want sort of a love story to New York, but it's not like just like Empire State Building, Times Square kind of New York. It's sort of like some hidden gems, some special places like special to Becca. And you get to see this great dynamic between them, and kind of how this foursome and this Christmas tradition has sort of both, I would say, like helped and hindered them over the years. And it's a bit of a coming of age. Like they are like 30, so it's not like young adult coming of age in any kind of a way, but at that time in your life where people's lives start to change, people start to move, people's lives start to take different directions, and how that can impact a friend group. So I really had a good time with this. It's clean as far as like any kind of sexy time goes. There's definitely some cursing and some dirty talk, I would say. So I guess it's not totally clean. Again, if you're looking for a seasonal book, this kind of takes place like Thanksgiving through Christmas over the years. And it's funny, like there's four main friends, and we only get the POVs of Finn and Hannah. And I would have loved to get all four POVs because I think it would have been really interesting, because everyone is so different and so dynamic. So we don't totally get those other two characters except through other people's eyes. So I fell in love with something in this book. I don't want to talk about what it is because I don't want to give anything away. And I wish we had some more of that. But there's also like some hijinks. It's like a little bit silly in a fun way, not like silly in a negative way, but kind of like hijinks ensue. And I mean like people on a float and like holiday time craziness in New York City, and you've got someone with like a ton of money, so some things are ridiculous and over the top, and they try and come up with like the zaniest Christmas experiences that they can have as a friend group. So it's very palate cleansery. It's very fun to follow Becca's journey and then see this at the end of her road. Great for this time of year, and especially if you're looking for sort of a seasonal thing, seasonal read, seasonal bingo. Maybe this one will be up your alley. But there's definitely not a ton of, I think, like platonic male-female friendships and just platonic friendships in a lot of books. And it's funny, I was listening to, of all things, Kristen Cavallari's new podcast, and she had her best friend Justin Anderson on it, and they were talking about how you should be in love with your best friend, and not necessarily in a romantic way, but have that same kind of love for someone. And these are people that you love and you would do anything for, the same you would with a partner, and these people are so important to you, and how like their love as platonic friends always has been and always will be so incredibly strong. And it's the same, but obviously like different, but like the same love that they've had for romantic partners and just being in it together. So it was just reminding me of that platonic relationship that we don't always see reflected in books. And or you get like a When Harry Met Sally where it's like, oh, well, eventually they're going to get together kind of a thing. So it was just kind of great to read about a solid group of friends. And it made me a little bit reminiscent and sentimental for my friends from college as well. And my days in the city and just sort of, you know, what life was like in your 20s. So it was a good time in that way. But it was a fun time for sure. And then the last book I read is A Dark Academia, which I'm hoping is going to open my doorway. I just hit my light into the dark academia realm for this year. And this is How We End Things by R.J. Jacobs. So this is kind of in an If We Were Villains-ish way, but yet totally different. So in this one, we have 5 grad students, and they are part of a psychology of deception study, which is being held at this college in North Carolina. And they are led by Professor Joe Lyons. So almost more like Secret History in that you have like this group of kind of elite students who are grouped together, and then you have like their fearless leader. So in this book, they are in the psych department and they do some experiments about deception and uncovering the science behind lies. So they do a test and it goes very, very sideways. And by the end of the night, somebody is dead. So we are in this small college town. It is right before spring break starts, so everyone has kind of left the area. And then we have a snowstorm barreling towards North Carolina, which is basically going to isolate everybody there. Because snow in the South is not like snow in New York. Snow in the South, people are not prepared for it, and this sort of leaves them isolated, kind of desperate, kind of freaked out, and somebody's dead and the police are investigating it. So we get multiple POVs in this from all of the different characters, which I found really, really interesting. And as I was just saying, I wish we had more of that in Christmas Orphans Club. So in this book, you get to meet everyone and get to know all of their stuff. And I really appreciated the different POVs in this one. It's no surprise to say everybody's keeping secrets. They are in the psychology of deception, so you can bet these are probably world's best liars out there, and things need to be unraveled and things need to come out. So we do get a police investigation in this, which I really enjoyed, and I really loved Alana Larson. She was fantastic. I love me a strong female police investigator, and I just really enjoyed this book. I will say a little bit stylistically, it was throwing me because rather than switching chapters with each POV, you kind of just get their names bolded within a chapter, and they might even be like Elizabeth within the same chapter. So it's almost like mini chapters within the main chapter. But once I kind of got like a couple chapters, how many times can I say the word chapter? Take a drink. I started to get the rhythm of the book, but it took me a little bit to adjust to that part of it. But I think if you like A Dark Academia, if you like that abandoned, isolated feeling, definitely sort of a heightened reality situation. Everybody's a suspect. You know, who did what, who's lying, who's telling the truth, who can we trust, and who forgot to change the battery in her camera, so the angle is probably slightly different. But it definitely is page-turny. I needed to know what was going to happen next. I wanted to get to the bottom of it. This was a book where I 1000% was puzzling things out. I was trying to get to the bottom of things. There were choices I didn't totally agree with, but people don't always make the best choices, which is totally fine. And I mean like character choices, not writing choices, like choices our characters made in this. But I did love the twists and all the different characters, and I just love A Dark Academia so much. You guys know so much. So if you're looking for a new writer to get into, he's a new to me writer, but not new, but new to me. I really had a good time with this, and I'm like flipping through it and I was like, yeah, and then this happened and this happened. I can't talk about any of it. I can't talk about any of it. But I really like the psychology angle of it, and I think like the psychology of deception obviously makes for such an interesting one. So R.J. Jacobs himself has been a psychologist since 2003, so you can obviously feel his knowledge infused into this. And he talked about, I of course listened to an interview with him after I read it, talked about how he consulted friends of his to, you know, make sure that elements of this were accurate. And he talked about studies that he did and that he was aware of and things that went sideways. And I just really appreciated that level of expertise that he brought to the page. But he also wrote, "And Then You Were Gone" and "Somewhere in the Dark." So I don't know if anybody else is familiar with him, but I definitely will be checking out more from him. And I really liked the North Carolina setting as well. And I loved that snow, isolated. I love when weather messes everything up for everybody. So it was a good time. It was a very good time. Can you tell? I enjoyed it. So that's it for October. So no, September. We're here to talk about September. That's it for September. I wound up reading 10 books, which I'm very happy about. And now slate is wiped clean. It is technically the beginning of October already, but we are here for the Bookstore bingo of it all. And my more intentional reading is underway. So I'm having a great time with it. I hope you guys will join me for it. I'm just going to keep plugging it because it's fun. But let me know if you've read any of these or if you've read other books by these authors. Lisa Jewell or Agatha Christie, you know, these authors you maybe have heard of. And then of course, For the Love of Steve Kavanaugh. I think, and I know as soon as I put this out there, I'm probably going to jinx myself. I think I want to read The Accomplice next, which is an Eddie Flynn book. And it's a woman who winds up going to trial for being the accomplice of her husband, who's a serial killer, but she claims she didn't know he was a serial killer. So that sounds extremely up my alley. And serial killer is a prompt for Bookstore bingo, so it sounds like a good one. But we will see what happens. We will see what happens. Right now I am knee deep in Midnight is the Darkest Hour by Ashley Winstead, and I'm loving every minute of it and every word of it. And I will be back to talk to you guys about her and Hannah Morrissey and everything else that I devour in October. So until the next video, take care, everybody. Thanks for being here. I hope everyone is having a fantastic fall. I am waiting for this torrential rain to come. I'm like a broken record. If you watch my vlog, it rained. If you're watching this, there's torrential rain and floods coming my way again. But it's supposed to wash out this final sticky, nasty air and finally bring in fall, and I am so ready for it. So until the next video, if you've made it this far, you are amazing. I love you guys so much, and I will see you really soon in another video. Bye, everybody.